And we are live. Thank you, everybody, for coming out again today, tonight, whatever it might be, wherever you're at. Another talk with Doc. And this time, I've actually come up with a name for our little chats, and it's going to be going forth being called Comics with Curmudgeons. So that fits the both of us really quite well if you know either of us. So, anyways, my buddy, my friend, and my partner in crime for tonight, Doc, how you doing?
I am wonderful, sir. Thank you for having me back on again. It
Oh
was
yeah,
fun the last couple of times, so
yeah.
might as
It's
well
gonna
do it
keep
again.
Yeah, we're gonna keep doing it when we can, and me actually putting it out a couple hours in advance this time. I actually got a little bit of people saying like, "Hey, notify me a little more in advance," and I'll come
Yes,
on. So that was great to see.
yes. Yeah.
Really,
Moving forward, I mean, we should probably just do like the, the like a DM group. That'd probably help.
might yeah, for sure. But the people that responded saying that put a smile on my face because I do want to have conversations with them.
Yeah,
Their their takes were very. I've heard their takes before on stuff, and I can appreciate them.
yeah, exactly. I'd love to see Javane
Mm-hmm.
on, and it's been a while since I talked to Pele, so yeah, that'd be dope.
And
Um,
Javane getting his thing off the ground. I keep forgetting what it's called. It's called no.
animated concepts.
That's it. With the animated concepts, chance for him to plug what he's doing and get that even going more so.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to what he's going to be bringing to the table there.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
mean, well, at this point too, like look what happened with the Ripaverse. He's doing fantastic.
oh god, yeah,
Yeah.
Eric July is he's doing a great bang up job. I can't wait to see what the product looks like whenever it gets released. I know that he's is still in his warehousing phase, getting everything. I don't think he ever understood the scope of what he was going to be getting into,
I don't think
and
anybody ever really does.
oh no, nobody does. But at the same time, also nobody ends up with a $3.5 million crowd fund. So
No, not on their first one for sure.
yeah, exactly. That normally, you're building economies of scale over time, and
Mm-hmm.
he kind of has to hit the ground running here. So more power to him, and best of luck to that man.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I have nothing but love for Eric July, both as a comics fan and as a fellow metalhead.
Yes,
So,
and
yeah,
and I just need more backwards from him.
I'm sure once things settle down with Esom, he'll hopefully get back to that.
Hopefully, yeah, because I dug that most recent album. So yeah.
That's cool. So today, I was thinking we'd talk about a couple different things, not specific topics, but just our usual train of thought concept topics. One, I thought we'd talk about the 90s. Some people love the 90s for comics, some people despise it. Some people like me who are just indifferent.
Yeah, I look, I can understand it, and I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about the '90s, especially from, oh, I guess you could say more modern comic fans that didn't actually grow up in it and
Mm-hmm.
that just read the Wizard, the Wizard kind of Cliff's Notes version, or the ones that got into it from like Tumblr and fucking
Right.
IO9,
Yeah.
um, and other like geek blog stuff like that. There's a lot of misconceptions about it, and while some of them are very true, a lot of them are not. I
Yeah.
mean, like for instance, the one that I always love hearing people that weren't there in the '90s, or even people that were, but weren't really paying attention, is them talking about how like variants. Oh yeah, variants killed the '90s. Bitch,
That was only
there
one,
isn't.
like maybe what, two and a half years of that, if that?
It's not even that. It's the fact that they were still incredibly limited. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, Spider-Man 1 came out, and technically it was three different printings
Yep.
plus you have first, second, and third printing with the regular, the gold and the silver, plus you had the newsstand versus direct market ones, and then there was the platinum one that was one for every store that would
Yeah.
And they talk about how that was excessive, or how X-Men 1 with its 5 covers was excessive. I mean, maybe a little bit. Like, I mean, the most egregious thing that was done in the 90s was Gen 13 #1 with 13 covers. And shit, you can't find a book that's coming out these days that's got less than 13 covers
Mm-hmm.
as a #1. So you guys want to talk to us about, variants killing the 90s? If so, then what the fuck is it doing to modern comics?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Because I remember some of them, like the red metallic, what was it, Bloodshot #1?
Yeah. I mean,
There
yeah, they
wasn't
had
that many of them out there. Yeah, you might have seen them in every comic store, but they had one.
one. Same with like the Exo Man of War #0 gold.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was one. That was one per store. Now, granted, there was still like 5,000 stores back then instead of maybe like 1,200 like there is now.
Right.
But that was still, there's 5,000 copies of it. All right, cool. I mean, it was actually, when you're dealing with 500,000, sellers, 5,000 copies is actually a little bit of scarcity.
Yeah.
So I know
There's
that
also a difference between now and then too. Yes, they did market those variants nowhere near as hard as they do now.
no, now it is, they didn't have ratios back then.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just everything you could order. You could order each of them. Now, granted, the Gen 13 ones, the only way you could get all 13 covers was in the box set.
Okay.
There was like 3-4 covers for the newsstand, or for like, or the newsstand direct market. That was it. If you wanted all 13, you bought the box set.
Right.
I have it. I have it on my shelf. The Gen 13 black box, and they had the red box too. I never got that one. I think I need to get that one. But still, it had.
You sound like me looking at a Gundam model website.
Oh, I
Oh,
know.
I think I need this. No, no, I
Yes.
don't. Stop.
Yeah, I know, right? I already got the black one. In fact, actually, I had 2 of the black ones. I sent one to Brian Ball
Mm,
from the Rags team.
right.
Uh, I sent him one a number of years ago. I don't remember, because each of them were signed by a different member of the team.
Creative team.
I think I sent him the Alex Garner signed one. I'll have to ask Brian because it's been a while since I sent it to him. I don't remember. But regardless, yeah, they talk about while the 90s they were a time of excess.
Oh, for everything.
Yes, they were, but compared to now, honestly, the comic excess, it's nothing. I mean, if
And the difference between then and now is the excess is, well, everywhere. I mean, it was
yes,
back then, but it was to varying degrees. Now it's just amped up to at minimum 8.
yeah, like I mean, seriously, like when Fantastic Four relaunched under Slott a couple of
Mm-hmm.
years ago, there were 73 variants. There were
That's
73 covers.
there's no need for that.
When you get to like Spider-Man 6, Amazing Spider-Man 666
Mm-hmm.
from, what would that was about 12 years ago. There's like 170 covers for that book.
That is just why.
Um, every #1 has got, even junk #1s like Children of the Atom #1. You're still
Right.
with a dozen covers.
Right. I mean, yeah, the 90s. I grew up in the 90s. I graduated high school in 94.
Yeah.
So I spent my, late teens, early 20s in the 90s. And the excess was everywhere in music. I mean, the 90s gave us Mortal Kombat, for fuck's sake.
It gave us Limp Bizkit and Rap Rock. I mean,
Can,
shit.
can you not remind me?
Well, but I mean, this is it's an example of the excess.
Yeah.
No, I think we were talking before we even went on, but
With
now
pro wrestling.
pro wrestling. It was excess. You had, then again, for every Degeneration X, you had the oddities or the brood,
Right.
and no one telling Vince McMahon no or Eric Bischoff no, and you had the NWO growing to be like 97 members. It's like 3/4 of the roster.
Right. Yeah. After a while, it really made no sense.
Exactly. But at the same time, they you still did have like the core ideas were good. They just never knew when to kind of moderate themselves. They never knew when to stop.
They never knew what line was the line you don't cross.
Yeah, but they also when they relied on the audience to tell them, "Hey, knock it the fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
Slow down. Hold on. You had a really good idea here. You took it way too damn far. Dial that shit way back down."
Well, the problem is in pro wrestling, there's a term for that called hot shotting.
Yeah.
And once you hot shot a territory, you know, those could have been considered territories even at that time.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
You know, once you hot shot a territory, there's no going back.
Yeah.
That was a problem with ECW too.
Yeah.
Because ECW, because while they may not have, they didn't have nothing but hardcore matches. You look back at some of the actual legit wrestling matches they had, and it's like, holy fuck, these guys are amazing.
Yeah, when you had like Jericho and
Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko and Benoit, that whole crop of guys, Rey Mysterio, some of the guys they bring over from Japan like Hayabusa.
Uh-huh.
You know, Masato Tanaka. But it's one of those things where they got more known for the ridiculousness. Like, you know, let's have a Taipei death match. Did you ever see that one? Ian Rotten versus Axel Rotten. They taped up their hands, dipped them in glue, and then dipped them in glass. Like, what the fuck?
Yep. The glass. Yeah, the Ian versus Axel, the Rotten brothers.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't mind some of the hardcore stuff because some of the guys could incorporate it well, like Sabu and Rob Van Dam.
Yes. Yeah. Like Sabu was like the master. He managed to do both the wrestling and the hardcore, and like Sabu Taz.
Mm-hmm. That was a great feud.
Oh God, yes, it really was. But then you'd have, you know, and even early Dudley Boys.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't, you know, they were the more wrestling team there. It wasn't until they went to WWF that they became the hardcore team.
Well, they were also at least initially, more of a comedic tag team.
Yeah, they were also a stable too, because you had like Spike,
the whole Dudley family.
Yeah, you had the whole Dudley
Big Dick
family.
Dudley and Sign Guy Dudley and Spike Dudley and all that.
But you had like oh God, it was New Jack and Mustafa, the Gangsters.
The Gangsters, yeah.
Yes.
Scary part is they worked one of the territories they worked in was Kentucky.
Oh, really?
For Jim Cornette. They were in Smoky Mountain Wrestling for a little while. And Cornette's told stories. He's like, I told you guys to get heat, but holy shit. You just walking to the ring generates heat.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just watching like New Jack come out with a shopping cart full of weapons.
I don't even think he was doing that at that point.
No, that wasn't until later.
One of the things that made me laugh about one of those matches he did, that he cracked somebody in the head with an old NES. I was like, oh, that had to fucking hurt.
Not only did it hurt, but the slightly retro gamer geek in me felt really sad because there went another NES off the market.
I would have been surprised. I mean, I don't remember it shattering, so quite possibly the thing probably still works.
Actually, you know what? Now that you mention it, yeah. I mean, granted, you breathe on a modern PlayStation wrong and it breaks.
Fucking monstrosity that the 5 is. My God. It's huge. I have one. The thing's fucking bigger than my audio receiver.
If there's one thing that technology has failed at, it is making gaming systems smaller.
You know, it's funny how everybody used to think back in the day as technology improved for whatever. Because at first we started seeing this with phones and computers and shit like that. Oh, the further we progress, the smaller we're going to get. And we started kind of seeing that in gaming.
And then they ballooned.
Well, the problem is when you're with the hardware they're using nowadays, you got to have that fucking ventilation.
Yeah,
And that airflow, if you're going to put some sort of good air cooling system in there, that's good to take some space. And yeah, Pope Metallicus in the chat is right, because I have a Series X as well, and it's definitely smaller. But the other thing is, it's not some fucked up shape. It's just a cube.
yeah, yeah. Well,
It's a lot
Sony
easier to
keeps.
sticking it places, and I don't mean that in some euphemism way.
Oh
Like, you
no.
know, but compared to the PS5, I'm like, holy fuck, I got to move shit around. Okay, all the nooks in my freaking entertainment center aren't big enough.
Well, yeah. When you have actual rectangles, you can Tetris that shit real well.
Mm-hmm.
When you got some weird curly fucking wavy design with
Yeah,
with strange curves on it, you're sitting there going, you're a piece of like hardware, you're technology,
it's
right?
supposed to
You're
be
not.
functional.
Yes, you were supposed to have very very basic form. You were a box to do things. Look like a
Mm-hmm.
box.
And out of the three consoles I have, because I also have a Switch, the PS5. Oh, actually, the Switch is the one that gets used the least, but the PS5 is not that far away from that.
Yeah, I honestly, that's why I gave up buying new consoles. Honestly, the last PlayStation I had was a slimline PS2.
Well,
Uh
the cool thing nowadays with the Xbox Series line,
huh.
they make for good emulator systems.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Because even if Microsoft turns around and decides to block this, there's a way you can install what's known as RetroArch,
Yeah,
which is the all-in-one emulator for fucking everything.
for retro arcade. Yeah.
For everything.
Yep.
You name the system, it's part of RetroArch. Even like,
Yep.
all the old Dragon's Lair games. There's a whole fucking ROM set of those, and it's more than the two Dragon's Lair and Space Ace.
Oh, okay.
But that's,
Yeah.
that's, and right now you can install that without doing anything to your system.
Well, one of these days I'm going to end up just building myself a MAME cabinet because it's a way for
Yeah,
me to.
you can go the RetroPie route with that, because that's what that would be.
Yeah.
Well,
Mostly it would just be to do
unless
the
you got like
carpentry.
a mini tower of some kind and use that instead.
Yeah. I'd probably just use it to mostly because I want to do the carpentry part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, hey, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Working with your hands. I mean, I build models. It's not anything grand or important,
Yeah.
but that feeling of putting something together, even if it is just following directions.
No, I'll literally design my own cabinet.
Oh yeah, and you can
Like,
go absolutely crazy with those.
uh-huh.
A buddy of mine bought like a prefab one.
Oh yeah.
But it was still like, you put it all together and set up the Raspberry Pi and the whole nine. It was just
Yeah.
everything in a box kind of deal. And I started doing some research and some other shit. Like, I saw this one setup. It was two screens, one for each player.
Okay.
I was like, that's got to be a nightmare to fucking configure.
Probably.
And then each person had your standard joystick with 8 buttons, not 6.
All right.
A start and select, a roller ball, a light gun, a dial, and the top of the joystick you could interchange with other ones.
All right. Yeah,
Well, the funny part is most that controller setup, not without the light gun, and I'm not sure about the dial, probably would only run you about $50 per person.
yeah, that's not surprising because I've looked into like the button and
Yeah, they're like the buttons
ball.
themselves are like $4 a pop, if that.
Yeah. The wiring's relatively cheap. You could buy a wiring harness.
Yeah, I said, oh, that's
Wiring
what my buddy
harness.
had me do for his cabinet, was all the wiring of the controllers, and
Yeah.
still not real happy with him about that.
Yeah, I'm.
And his
But I
is
mean,
a normal, just 6-button start button for each, and 6 buttons, and then like an additional 4 overall, so a total of 16 buttons to wire up. Yeah, you'd think it'd be good, except the pictures online from the company were backwards. And I'm sitting there for like a full night going, why can't I get this to work? I followed the directions. Like, you know what? Let me see something. And then I rotated the board. I'm like, oh, you sons of bitches.
somehow not surprising. But yeah. Oh, I think we're way off topic of the
Yeah.
90s at this point.
I mean, the one thing too you can say about the 90s, and you really can't disagree with me on this one, is pouches everywhere.
Well, of course. I mean, look, what if 1 is cool, 2 is useful, 4 is practical, 97 is, well, obviously the
I
golden
wouldn't have
number.
a problem if you saw some of the characters that had excessive amounts of patches. And let's go with this one, for example. Cannonball
Yeah.
actually pulled something out of one of those pouches.
All right.
I I don't recall ever seeing him take something out of one of those pouches. Like
yeah,
ever.
yeah. I know Deadpool would, but he'd do it as a bit.
Yeah, Deadpool.
Um,
I don't. You know, when it comes to certain things, I let Deadpool slide on more.
yes, because he's a comic relief character.
I mean, I actually got an actual kick when he was Zenpool for a little while there.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, okay, I'll buy it. That was actually tolerable for that out of that storyline.
Yeah. But you know what? Cable would from time to time pull shit out of his
He was
pouches.
another one that would, but you'd actually see him change clips in guns too.
Yes. Yeah.
So when it came to actually utilizing what was on as part of his costume, he would. Again, someone like Cannonball,
Yeah.
never.
There's no need for it. I mean, there was,
Havoc with the vest.
yeah, like, well, they did that with the entire, like, with the
Yeah, that's
leather
true.
jackets. They
Yeah,
did it
that's
with like
true.
the entire team. Um, everybody had the leather jackets. But then again, you know what? Look, so you had that like Peter David era X Factor
Mm-hmm.
with the leather jackets that everybody memes on. But at the
That book
same
actually was
time,
not terrible at that time.
well, no,
Was
no,
it
no,
great?
it was really good. But what, like 8 years later, you have Grant Morrison come in, give the entire X-Men leather everything, and
Yeah.
nobody bats an eye. Now,
Yeah.
granted, Grant's designs from Frank Quitely were a lot more simplistic. They didn't have all the extraneous bullshit and lines on them that the Peter David X Factor era
Mm-hmm.
ones did, but at the same time, they made them unnecessarily puffy leather jackets. It was like
Mm-hmm.
somebody made fucking South Pole out
Yeah,
of
into a
leather.
leather jacket. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's other little things too. Like I know in the '70s this was a thing too. Where the cover art didn't depict what was going on in the book.
Yeah.
But it felt to me sometimes it really felt like the '90s really took that to a whole new level.
They did on and off. Like,
But it also wasn't the
some
same
books.
ways that the '70s did it.
Yes, yeah. But then you got into the 2000s and Joe Quesada's iconic cover mandates, where it didn't have to have anything at all to fucking do. It just had to be a cool pinup,
Yeah.
where basically every cover was just a pinup. Now, at least the 90s, while it wouldn't necessarily be representative of the content inside the comic, was still a like action comic cover.
Yeah.
Like, it was a superhero comic cover. It wasn't pinup art that some artist is going to be selling prints of at whatever convention you go to next week.
Right.
That was so. I'm always torn on that. But again, they took it excess.
And they took it to the '90s.
Yes, the
I mean,
90s the shit out.
don't get us wrong either. Anybody who's in the chat, I know Pope's still here, a couple other people as well. It's not that we dislike the '90s. Like I said, I grew up in it. My best memories are from that time period. But the '90s also did give us good things as far as comics go.
Yeah.
The X-Men were still going strong.
Yes, you had the Joe Casey
Mm-hmm.
over on Cable. You had Joe Kelly and Steve Siegel and Scott Lobdell in that office. So,
And all like the books in orbit around the X-Men were pretty, for the most part, solid as well. Like you just mentioned, Cable and X-Force and Wolverine.
You had Warren Ellis actually doing his first run on Excalibur. That was the first guy to actually make it interesting again since Claremont had left, because honestly, I never really liked Alan Davis's uh Excalibur.
Yeah, I like the original run, which is again. Oh my god, you just said his name, and oh boy,
Claremont.
yeah, thank you. My brain has been stupid since Saturday.
It's fine. But yeah, you had the Claremont run, and then you had Alan Davis take over the book for a while, and it got kind of middling and just meandering. I mean,
The
I
one cool
think
thing about it, especially the initial run with Claremont, was it was the weird X-Men book.
yes,
Not that X-Men themselves weren't weird, but this was weird in a Doctor Who meets uh, Twilight Zone.
yeah. It tried to grab little bits of. I mean, it was the quintessentially like British
Mm-hmm.
X book. It let Chris and Alan, and I believe Alan Davis is British.
With a name like that, I wouldn't be surprised.
I believe he is. I could be wrong though. And I know Chris was born in England, but he grew up in New York. So,
Right.
um,
And Pope Metallic is the first in the chat's right. The '90s Daredevil was pretty good for the most part.
yeah,
Um, and the Dark Horse Star Wars comics from that time also were quite good.
yeah. I mean,
Because at the time we weren't getting a lot of Star Wars media outside of the novels.
no, that's all you had. I mean, for Star Wars geeks, you hadn't had anything visual
Mm-hmm.
in going on 15 years at that point. You know,
Nah, there was a couple
from
of there was the trilogy of Super Nintendo games.
those real. I guess. I mean, I guess those count.
You know, you said
Yeah,
visual media.
yeah. I mean, you had that. Well, and you had that one terrible game for the Genesis 32X.
Yes. I mean, there was a bunch of video games for Star Wars. Well, not really a bunch, a few. But
Yeah,
you know, as far as other media, you had the video games and novels.
yeah. You had video
And
games.
when they released something, it was generally at least decent.
Yeah. But it didn't. None of them, like at least visually, didn't really add to the lore. I guess you could say the video games. Honestly, I'll be honest. I've never been a video gamer that gave a shit about the story. It's just a question of
Mostly like that.
what can I blow up? How do I achieve whatever the next thing is? I already forgot what the fuck story you're trying to tell me.
Right.
Before I get to the next cutscene. So how do I gather more shit and destroy more things? That's my video game playing. So maybe, I mean, there might have been lore being added to it from the video games, but and it, the books didn't necessarily there wasn't really a lot of talk about whether or not the books were canon, not canon. Back then, it was just kind of like, okay, it's Star Wars stuff. So getting the comics gave you something visual that like lets you see the characters that you knew again for the first time in quite a while. And then you got the special editions and then the prequels. So that's a little disappointing.
As Fiend Machine says, I'm not familiar with that part of Daredevil's run.
Oh, that was the Scott McDaniel run.
But that definitely screams '90s Daredevil having thigh armor.
Yes, it was the Fall from Grace arc where Daredevil quote died. And yeah, he was wearing his typical red costume, and then he had the armored costume with the thigh armor and like shoulder pads and spikes on his I think on his like they kind of tried to make him kind of like Azrael Batman.
Oh, Jesus.
Let me see if I could.
So they literally tried doing the Daredevil is Marvel's Batman shtick.
Yes, they did.
Literally,
And
in that case. I was just about to say, too, how funny is in the '90s? Superman dies, Batman gets his back broken, Wolverine gets the adamantium ripped out of him, Daredevil, quote unquote, dies. It's like, wow, We really were just doing everything they could to change the status quo, I guess you could say.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can uh send you this in the chat here, and you can share it if you want. Uh this there you know what though? I did not mind. Oh yeah, he didn't have the spikes on his arms. He had that's where he kept his billy clubs, like on his forearm.
Hmm.
It was an interesting design. And they went to like a red and black with like silver kind of sharp armor. Um, and they did that same like chin strap style. Remember that was a thing, like the chin and head strap thing,
Yeah.
where it went down around the chin, it came up almost like it was a goatee, or like it. I don't know how it attached to the face, like how the clothing was staying, formed there, and then it would have like the ears would be exposed, and then it'd have like the headband.
Right.
Except for this was, it still had it had like the it kind of kept the typical Daredevil mask style, except for it added to it
Yeah.
in some weird ways. Uh, Almost like he was wearing a football helmet.
Like an old school football helmet.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it's a cool design, but at the same time, it did not last long. Let's just say
No.
that. I think it only lasted maybe less than a year.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, but it was a new, you know, oh yeah, and then Theme Machine also points out not as 90 as when they redesigned Doctor Fate, and they just called him Fate,
Fate, yeah, I
and
read something. Yeah,
he had the
I
he didn't
don't
wear the helmet
recall
no more helmet. He had an Ankh tattoo over his
his
eye.
eye. Yeah, wasn't he also the one that turned into or was a male stripper?
I think you're right. I think it was a male stripper. There was something to do with a male stripper involved. Uh,
Oh, God, DC. It's funny too. Like I have a hard time. Even my friend have talked about this. When which company's worse when they fail?
oh,
Nowadays it's just flip a coin, but back then and even further back, it's like, oof, that was not good. That was so not good, especially for that character.
yeah. It was. Honestly, I say DC fails harder.
Mm.
When it fails, I think it fails harder. Because DC seems to be quite out of touch,
Yeah, I kind of
with
always got something similar, like because like the older stuff in their library always still felt like they were kind of sitting there and they
yeah, like they were always trying to chase a youth demographic
well, it's
that
not
they
even
had
that.
had.
That's not what I so much what I was going for. It was more along the lines of they're behind the times. Like the stuff in the 70s and 80s still felt like the 50s and 60s in some ways.
Yes, they were. Well, in a lot of ways, as I've said, DC for going on 25 years now has been just trying to copy Marvel's homework,
Yeah,
unsuccessfully. Because, see, now, okay, you look back at the 80s. What were the two books of the 1980s? It was New Teen Titans and X-Men.
yeah,
X-Men managed to grow beyond just X-Men and carry spin-off titles. You ended up with New Mutants, you ended up being able to carry X Factor later, and then it got big enough that it was able to split into two books, Uncanny and Adjectiveless. Um, but Titans didn't. It just kind of fizzled. And they just like they're like, oh wait, hold on, it's more popular than the Justice League and Superman and Batman. We gotta fix this.
And sometimes, I wonder if their mentality was just that, just not in the way you mean. Like, oh
Yes.
no, 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 we can't have that book be better than our two flagships because at that time it was two. It
Well,
was Superman and Batman, and maybe the Justice League. Like Wonder Woman wasn't factored in at that point, if I recall correctly.
yeah, not really. I mean, she was always like the one that they wanted to be big, but if she didn't get big, then so be it. Um, well, DC has done this repeatedly. When they could have leaned in on something that was super successful,
Mm-hmm.
and no, I hate to use the phrase milked it, but gotten more mileage out of it.
Right.
They have thrown their own. They've tripped over their own fucking shoelaces. Um, to be in order to try to glom, popularity for Superman and Batman onto whatever the thing that is. Because you had it in the 2000s. 2001, the biggest book published by DC was The Authority.
Hmm.
And it had a gay Superman and Batman analog
Yeah,
as
you're
two of
not
the
wrong.
leads, and they started editorially interfering with it. I mean, there's a reason.
It went downhill because I told you the bits that I've read of it. You're like, oh yeah, most of that was good.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why Mark Miller won't work for DC anymore. And he said as long as Paul Levitz was there and Dan Didio, he would not work there.
Well, one of them's gone.
Both of them are. I think Levitz is gone too.
Well, then maybe he will come back. But because I tried reading some of that New 52 Authority, and oh dear Christ,
Oh, it was terrible. Because all the things that made it great, that nobody understood, and even after Grant Morrison fucked up the Authority by just leaving, he fucked up Wildcats and the Authority by just not doing his job, just simply not writing the issues. It killed the Wildstorm universe. They ended up having other people come on. I mean, the book finished up with like Tim fucking Seeley as the writer. That's how far down it had gone. But so you had Ellis and then Mark Miller on it, and it was supposed to be followed up by Brian Azzarello. Issue 30 was supposed to be Brian Azzarello taking
way
over.
to scale down your edge a millimeter at a time.
Yeah. But they ended up canceling it instead, and you got Robbie Morrison and Dwayne Turner. And if you're sitting there going, who the fuck are they? So was everyone in 2004.
Yeah. Because that was just what I was thinking. I'm like, who the fuck is that? I'm not the best with a lot, especially more modern names.
Yeah.
But even I'm like, who?
However, at the same time, like in 2003, when they were promoting it and it said The Authority, Morrison Turner, and you were thinking 2003, you're like, holy shit, Grant Morrison and Michael Turner on The Authority.
Right.
And then you ended up, I mean, this was like fake Diesel and fake Razor. Like level bait and switch bullshit.
Oh, and that was not appreciated by fans at all.
No.
And the funny thing is, there were a little people in WCW were like, "Oh fuck, what are they going to do with this? How's this going to fuck us?" And they saw what happened in the fan reaction. They're like, "Oh, never mind."
Yes, exactly. Oh, never mind. Who cares? But yeah, I mean, so like, back to I guess the point here is that DC has been playing catch up, and they will sabotage their own shit just because it's not going the way they want. The things that they want over aren't getting over. In a lot of ways, I think they got Vince McMahonitis.
Mm,
Um, you know, they want something to get over. If it doesn't get over,
they'll make it get over.
yes, Marvel in the 90s at least listened.
Yeah.
When fan reaction was bad, they stopped doing a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when fan reaction was good, they did more of it.
Yep. I mean, it might have taken a few months for them to get the message.
Yeah, it'll take a few months for them to get the message. They just have to they watched, sales, they read the letters that came in, whether they printed them or not. They still
Right.
printed the best ones, like the ones that were giving glowing reviews, but backstage they were like, back in the office they were like, shit, 95% of the letters we're getting are telling us to go to hell and this is terrible. I think we need to change direction.
Mm-hmm.
Um so they
And you know
did.
what? And the great thing about back then is either they would just cancel the book and start over,
Yeah.
or there'd be some in continuity story that changed things up back to more normal, which fine. But they didn't do a fucking event for it,
Nope, they did not do an event for it. Um,
unless it
yeah,
was already part of an event.
yeah, exactly. Um, so they didn't do an event for it. And honestly, they didn't want to draw attention to the fact they never mentioned the criticism. They just adjusted to it, and they didn't want to draw attention to the fact that they
Mm-hmm.
were changing the shit that they failed to get over back to the thing that was already over. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't talk about it. They're like, well, we thought it'd be refreshing to get back to basics.
Yeah, or
And that was,
something.
yeah, that was it. That was all it was.
And speaking of events, that's one thing too that I would have to say the '90s weren't even excessive about was events. Yeah, we did see a couple long ones, and DC got a little overboard with the death of Superman into the reign of the Superman and the rebirth of Superman or whatever the fuck they called it. It's like,
Yeah,
wow, okay, guys.
yeah, the
But that still
return.
it technically wasn't this big, huge crossover outside of stuff and death of Superman.
No, and basically you had the death
Batman's
of
event,
Superman. Well, you had
Nightfall, was self-contained.
yeah, you had death of Superman, which was contained to the Superman books. And then whenever he actually died, they did like a memorial across the line, but it was just for 1 month. Um, and they referenced it in other books. That was fine, but they didn't like focus on that. And then they did Reign of the Supermen, which got back to having 4 separate books, so you could pick which Superman you wanted to read.
And overall, that story isn't terrible.
Oh, it is.
Well,
Um,
it's better than some things nowadays, like
well,
Bendis's recent Superman run.
well, early Reign of the Supermen was pretty bad. It wasn't until about like 4 months in or so that they started like getting a direction
Mm,
for where they were going, and you could see that it was starting to like pull together, and then it kind of went back to being almost like you were reading a weekly Superman book.
right.
And then you got the end of that, and then you got the return of Superman or something.
Yeah, I think that's
um
what it was.
yeah, so, and the same thing with X books. They would have their annual X over, but it was self-contained to their line.
Mm-hmm.
And all it
Well,
was basically like reading one, it just made them all like reading a weekly X book.
at the same time too, in the Marvel in the '80s, especially a little bit in the '90s, but they did do company wide crossover events, but they kept it to the annual and maybe the issue the annual came out in. Or
Yes.
the issue the month the annual came out, like, so like the X-Men for that month and the X-Men annual would tie into Atlantis Attacks or the Evolutionary War, and
Uh,
same with Fantastic Four and then the Avengers, but it would only be for that.
yeah,
you know
actually, but you know what? Most of those months, the main title, the ongoing title, didn't even reference it. It was just
mm,
they wouldn't reference it until like 2 months later.
yeah, it's possible, because I can kind of remember at least one of those two I just mentioned, they actually did that, like the annual and then that month's issue for the continuity
Yeah,
tied into it.
yeah.
I just don't remember if it was Atlantis Attacks or Evolutionary War. I think it might have been Atlantis Attacks.
I think it might have been two.
Whereas the monthly issue set up what was going to happen in the annual.
Yeah, and I think it was because it was more the one that one spun out of, whatever title that spun out of. Like,
Yeah.
it might have been Avengers or
Or Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four. Yeah, something
I
like
think
that.
that one might have been the Avengers, though, actually, because that might have been. No, was that around the time when Namor was an Avenger?
It might have been West Coast Avenger.
Maybe. It's
I
hard.
don't remember.
I
I didn't
mean,
read. I didn't really like the Avengers in the '80s or in the late '80s, and
yeah,
most of the '90s.
they weren't good then.
No, when Rage is on the team, they're not
Yeah.
very good.
Hmm.
You're basically the new Warriors.
Essentially. Because they
But
tried incorporating new Warriors members into
yes,
the Avengers a few times now, and it's never worked.
yeah, exactly. It's like whenever DC tries to add Titans onto the Justice League, it
And the only
doesn't.
time that's ever really worked was Robin,
Yeah,
Cyborg,
sort of.
sort of,
I think
and
Cyborg works more than most of them, but
then Speedy,
yeah, but that's
but
because Speedy became
Arsenal.
yeah. So yeah, they got their own identity.
Yeah,
But so yeah, you have a lot of those that they kept their line wide events to the annual. It went out in 1 month. Sometimes it spread over two. Um, but it was just the annual. And now individual like offices would do their own little events.
right. Case in point, Inferno, but that was the 80s.
Yeah, Inferno was one of the only ones that because it added Thor in, but that was just because
Also, it also added Spider-Man and Daredevil. I think it added anybody who's in New York City.
yeah, but it was mostly like, or I'm sorry, Mutant Massacre is the one that
That's
had
what added
Thor
Thor.
issues.
Yeah,
But that's because Walt and Wheezy were also on Thor, and they're like, hey, we could do something with Thor and add him in here too, because why the hell not?
yeah. That one was just strange. Of all the characters they could just kind of randomly add, it's like other than that reasoning, they've worked on both books, but it's like Thor.
So
Really? In a mutant book? I mean,
yeah.
Spider-Man, sure. The Fantastic Four, okay. Maybe even the Avengers as a whole, but Thor by himself?
Yeah. Now,
and yet that motherfucker doesn't show up anytime, though the X-Men are actually dealing with Asgardians.
Oh no, hell no. Yeah, he doesn't even show up if they've dealt with the Wrecking Crew. But no, so you got now. It wasn't until I guess the first big crossover that you had in the 90s, though, was Onslaught.
There might have been a couple. That was the first big one. I think there's a couple other ones.
You'd have the occasional crossover that wasn't really an event.
I'm actually gonna bring a list up now. My hard drive,
because like Clone Saga didn't spread out of Spider-Man.
Yeah, was that 90s though? I thought that was more early 2000s.
No, Clone Saga was 90s. It was like 1994, 95. It was about a year before Onslaught. Because I think Onslaught was ASM about 440.
Yeah, because I'm looking at a list right now,
and it's like 420
of all the major Marvel events. Yeah, I would definitely say so. Fiend Machine, and that was actually before.
That was actually 80s, I think. No, it was like 1990.
Yeah, so Active Vengeance would be the first 90s, then Extinction Agenda, which was kept to the Xbox.
Yep.
Cross Time Caper, which was kept to Excalibur.
Yep.
Infinity Gauntlet was another big major crossover.
But it did outside of Silver Surfer and Doctor Strange, and
maybe the Avengers.
It launched an Adam Warlock book. It did not actually really touch.
And let's not forget Quasar, because who couldn't forget him?
Oh yeah, I mean everybody. But now, Acts of Vengeance though is hard for me to quantify, because all it was they've got somebody else's villain, and there was
an overarching story behind it.
Yeah, there was an overarching story, but it was only the villain plot. The
Hmm.
the actual hero plot, you know, there wasn't any.
Yeah, there wasn't much there.
Yeah, it was, well, can the Red Skull take out Spider-Man so
Right,
that Doom can go after the X-Men and Magneto can go after the Avengers
right.
for, you
The
know,
20th time already, anyways. Outside of the Red Skull versus Spider-Man, those other two have been done.
yeah. Um but so it was just about like, okay, cool, everybody gets somebody else's villain this month, but there wasn't any like overarching plot, and it came and went. Uh there was no big team up of the heroes
Right.
versus the villains, so I wouldn't really count that as an event. I don't
And
count it as an event unless it gets its own one shot included somewhere, either at the
um,
beginning or the end, because Onslaught did.
yeah, no, there is no. I'm looking at the list of books for Acts of Vengeance right now, and holy fuck, there were 68 of them.
Yeah, but there was no actual like
Nope.
crossover, and not a single one was listed as like part one, except
Oof.
or part
There's some.
two.
There are some bad ones in here. Wow.
Now, like a lot of them, because
Solo Avengers. Do you remember that?
yep, I remember Solo Avengers, which is
Uh,
mostly a Hawkeye book.
yeah, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Oh,
Um,
Damage Control, Volume 2,
yeah,
even. Oof.
yep, because they couldn't get a damage control book to work for a day worth a damn.
Yeah, then after Infinity League Gauntlet, you then had Operation Galactic Storm, which was kept to the
The
Avengers and
Avengers,
anything. And, Captain America's in there, Iron Man's in there, but anybody who's part of the Avengers.
yeah, the Avengers family, and I think maybe
Mm-hmm.
New Warriors might have been included, or Guardians. I think,
Quasar,
okay,
again, because
yeah.
it was in space, so it makes sense for that time period. Then Infinity War, another fairly important crossover.
Infinity War, it had a mini series, but it didn't, outside of like a handful of books.
Yeah, it was definitely smaller than the Infinity Gauntlet as far as who got drawn into it, because the other
Yeah,
books that aren't Infinity War numbered were Silver Surfer, Warlock and Infinity Watch, Marvel Comics Presents, Quasar again,
I think,
Fantastic Four,
yeah,
Wonder Man,
yeah.
and that's it.
And there was a couple of issues of either adjectiveless or ASM that had like the spider doppelganger.
Right.
So it was kind of very, very loosely connected to it, but not much.
And then after that, another X crossover and an Executioner song.
Yeah, execution, but again, kept solely
Infinity
to the X.
Crusade, which kept to the cosmic books
Yep,
that time around. Maximum Carnage, which kept to Spider-Man.
yep.
Yep, strictly Spider-Man. Fatal Attractions again kept to the X books.
Yep.
Blood Ties. That was actually
that was just,
Avengers X-Men.
yeah, but it was only like a like 3 month crossover.
My listing has 5 issues.
Yeah, and I think it was only,
3 Avengers, 2 X-Men.
yeah, and it was only the adjectiveless book. The uncanny book didn't even involve itself
Right.
because it was around the time of Scott and Jean's wedding.
Right.
Um, so then you probably had the Clone Saga in there. I mean,
Uh, it's
Clone
somewhere in
Saga is
here.
kind of going
Uh,
on in the background.
yeah. And then Star Blast.
I literally have no idea what Star Blast is.
It is got its own line of books, 4 of them. And then the other books involved are Quasar. Holy fuck, did they like putting him in events in the 90s?
They needed to make somebody give a reason to buy his goddamn comic.
Yeah. Secret Defenders.
Okay, so that was the one that had the
Valkyrie
original.
and Andromeda. I think that
Was
was like,
it?
I
I
think
thought
it
Secret
might have.
Defenders. I think Secret Defenders was the one with Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider, Silver Surfer, Namor,
You
like
may actually
Pip.
Secret Defenders. It had okay. Holy fuck, this is so 90s. Doctor Strange, Wolverine, Nomad, Darkhawk, and Spider Woman.
Ah, yeah, that sounds
Holy,
about right.
holy fuck, that's 90s.
Yep, and
And then the
it was just Julia Carpenter Spider Woman.
correct, the redheaded one.
Yep.
And then as far as Star Blast was Submariner and Fantastic Four and Quasar were the three non-Star Blast books and Secret Defenders. So that's
Okay.
like
So
that's why you've never
literally,
heard of it.
yeah, books that nobody read. Although I think Jay Lee might have been doing the art is very early on. Jay
Could
Lee
be.
on Namor.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's possible. And then
so,
after Star Blast, we got a double X event. We have the Phalanx Covenant
yep.
leading into Age of Apocalypse.
Yep.
Then the Crossing,
Yep. Which was a Avengers.
Avengers Family one.
Yeah.
Then Onslaught.
Yes, because they needed to fix all the shit that the Crossing broke with Avengers.
Then Operation Zero Tolerance.
Yep. Now that was one that I know that was again almost strictly connected to the X books.
There's one issue of Spider-Man in there.
Okay, yeah, I remember that because he fought the Tri Sentinel or something.
Right. Then Heroes Reborn.
Okay, again, the Avengers and Fantastic Four exclusively.
Yep. And with a couple of its own numbered ones.
Yeah.
At least one a 0.5. Good job there, Marvel.
The 0.5 actually, because that was around the time that they were doing obscure like one-offs that you could send in to Nabisco.
Yeah,
because
I remember that actually.
Wolverine had issue 102.5.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I hear that number, I just think WDVE. But yeah, that's a mail away from Nabisco.
And then Heroes Return.
Okay.
Then another X one.
Yep, because you would have had
Apocalypse the 12.
Yeah, the 12.
And
that one was actually exclusively to only the two X-Men books. It didn't even include.
My list actually has Cable, X-Men, and Wolverine in there too.
Okay, that might be
Two
very loose tie-ins. But the wait, really?
It starts with Uncanny X-Men 376, and it says the second issue in continuity should be read as Cable 75.
Oh yeah, you are correct. And then
X-Men 59, X-Men 96, Wolverine 146 and 147, X-Men 60, Uncanny 377, Cable 76, X-Men 97, and then the annual.
Yep. And then also right before that was Astonishing X-Men Volume 2, issues 1 through 3.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what's crazy is there were a lot of events in the 90s, but there a lot of them were contained because there's still more yet in this list. Then you have Contest of Champions 2.
Okay.
Whatever. That's yeah. Avengers Forever.
Okay, but that was again
Avengers exclusive.
Yeah.
And it was own line of books. There were no tie-ins. It was just Avengers Forever 1 through 12.
Yeah, wasn't that the one with Scott Collins and Joe Casey?
I believe you're right. Then Maximum Security.
Okay, that one was line wide, but it basically was over the course. Like most of the other books were, it was basically, we're a Skrull prison planet for like a week. And now it's over. Okay.
Yeah, because this had its own line, Avengers Infinity, Thor, Uncanny, ASM, Black Panther, Iron Man, Captain America, Captain Marvel, Bishop, Hulk, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, Thunderbolts. Who knew they were around that long? X-Men, Gambit, Marvel Knights. So yeah, that one was a bit of everybody.
Yeah.
The Kang Dynasty, again, just Avengers.
Yep.
Infinity Abyss, own self-contained thing by itself.
Yeah, it didn't even connect to anything.
Avengers Disassembled, self-contained.
But by the time you're already in the 2000s.
Is that 2000s now?
Yeah, disassembled. Honestly, even the 12 was like 99 in the early 2000. That
Yeah, because
was,
the annual is not from 1999.
yeah, because I remember I was in college when the uh the 12 was going on, and I was done before we got to some of the other things on that list.
I kind of wonder too, because Fiend Machine brings up in the chat, Apocalypse to 12 is where Wolverine gets his adamantium back.
Yeah, that was a loose it wasn't like an issue. See,
I wonder if that was Marvel's way of going, sorry guys.
it kind of was, because the well, hold on, let me think here. They gave him his adamantium back. Yeah, that would have been around Wolverine number 145. Um, because they had already given him his adamantium back, because that was when he was the Horseman Death. Because Wolverine, you thought died in Uncanny 376, or 375. Something. No, I think it was 376. You thought he died, and then they did he got actually replaced by a scroll, and the scroll is the one that died, but Wolverine had been kidnapped and turned into the Horseman of Death by Apocalypse. And that was even his issues weren't like part 1 or part 2 or part 3 or anything
they're just
like that.
numbered continuity.
Yeah, they were tangentially involved. The 12 story was only in Uncanny and X-Men.
Right.
The other, like the Cable tie-in, was more of like, it would be like a tie-in now,
right,
rather than part of the main story.
Right. Well, the funny thing is, like nowadays, not too far after that event happens, you got the major Marvel event, as I like to call it, where it was like 5-6 events just chain linked.
Oh yeah.
It started with what, Civil War?
I would say it actually started with Disassembled, because you ended up with first House of M, then M Day, then Decimation, then Civil War, then Secret Invasion.
As far as this list goes, it would be House of M, Decimation, Planet Hulk, The Collective, Annihilation, Road to Civil War, Silent War, The Initiative, and then you get
Initiative,
and then you get into like Secret Empire, Secret Invasion,
and then Dark Reign,
and then Siege.
Yep, and then the Age of Heroes or something.
I know that whole time period turned one of my buddies he still collects now, but he mostly just collects slabbed stuff when he can.
Yeah.
That just turned him off from reading.
That was around the time that I gave up reading other than X-Men and Uncanny. That was it. That was the only things that were left on my pull.
As he put it,
and ASM.
He's like, I wouldn't even care. He's like, I wouldn't even care if they did that. If just every once in a while they do like a 3, 4, 5 month block of one-off stories, villain of the week.
Yeah.
Just not everything. He's like, not everything has to be this grand cosmic thing,
or the kind of just regular ongoing soap opera. That's what they need. They got away from because they started going for bigger and bigger and bigger.
That's like with me. Like I'm a Justice League and Justice Society fan. Sometimes I tend to like Society more because they didn't get retarded.
Yeah.
But the JLA sometimes gets so cosmic in scale. It's like, again.
Oh, of course, because
again with a galaxy-rending event. Like, are you fucking? I mean, I'll give them credit. It's self-contained to the Justice League book.
It's scope creep.
Mm-hmm.
And now back in the 90s, they started getting scope creep. Um and you started seeing it because you started seeing bigger and bigger and more frequent events. I mean,
Yeah.
as we could see, because like 80s, it was like, okay, you had Inferno, and holy shit, that was like the only thing for that entire year.
There was still quite a few. I mean, this list I have might consider you might have some stuff on there. There might be some stuff on here you wouldn't consider an event,
Yeah,
but it
but
depends on what your definition of event is. Like for example, the first Marvel event that they're concerned happened was the original Galactus saga.
that's 3 issues in Fantastic Four that weren't
Yeah.
referenced anywhere else, really.
Right, 48, 49, and 50. And then the Kree Skrull War, then the death of Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, all those things, they're pivotal moments, but they're not events.
Right, then Secret Empire, the first one.
Again, yeah, that was just Grunwald writing. That was part of the ongoing soap opera
Cap.
in Cap
It was
until
166 through 176. It was 10
yes,
issues, in line with inline continuity. Did no separate books, no spin offs, no tie ins.
if there's not a spin-off, if there's not a crossover, and if there's not a tie-in, it's not a fucking event. It's just an important moment.
So would
Like
you consider Days of Future Past an event?
no, it's
Even
just
though
an
it's
important moment.
referenced in other books that aren't X books?
It gets referenced well, like a decade plus later.
I mean,
Like,
because the
oh
list
yeah,
I have also has Dazzler involved in it.
yeah, no, Dazzler didn't even come out for like another year after, because that came out in what, like 1981,
Dazzler was
83.
out in the 70s with her own book.
Was
When she still had
she?
like the roller skates and the blue
Yeah,
over her eyes.
but she was, that was the joke about Dazzler, that she was
She was 70s personified.
yes, she was 70s personified, and she was a decade, yeah, 1980. She was, or actually March 1980, 81.
Because this has listed Dazzler 1 through 11. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 through 16. Marvel Fanfare 1 through 4. A What If. An Avengers Annual. Marvel Superheroes 10 and 11 from Volume 3. Marvel Team Up. Bizarre Adventures. Spider Woman.
All right. Now this is actually bugging me. Okay. All right.
What does.
So, uh, okay, Days of Future Past came out 6 months before Dazzler #1. So while it may have referenced events, you
Yeah, I highly
know,
doubt it tied in.
it did not. It couldn't have tied
I'm gonna
in
have to. I'm
because
gonna
it
have to
doesn't.
look and see what that's all about
Yeah,
because that's
Days of
strange.
Future Past. The street release date on Uncanny 141 is October 21st, 1980.
So then,
Dazzler #1 doesn't
uh-huh.
even come out until March of 81.
So by your criteria, then the first major Marvel event,
Secret War or
Secret Wars,
Secret War.
Secret War. Yeah, there's quite a bit before Inferno.
Yeah, it'd be Secret War.
Yeah, it'd be Secret
Uh,
Wars, Secret
yeah,
Wars 2, Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, Kraven's Last Hunt, Evolutionary War. Wow, that's as old as
I
that
would.
is. Damn.
Yeah, I would.
Then Inferno.
Again, I wouldn't even. I wouldn't consider Craven's Hunt. I wouldn't consider
No, that's a
X.
Spider-Man story
It's a Spider-Man story. It's a Spider-Man crossover.
between his 3 books.
Yes. Again, this is back to events are things that occur,
Yeah, some of
that
these, like you said earlier, were
exceed the
pivotal
scope.
moments.
Yeah, they exceed the scope of your little corner of the universe.
And Fall of the Mutants was X-contained. Mutant Massacre, like you said, had Thor and Power Pack and
Yeah,
Daredevil actually.
yeah. So I would almost consider Fall of the Mutants an event. But the
Mutant
thing is,
Massacre, Fall of the Mutants
yeah,
was
Mutant Massacre. You're correct. Uh, they came out like a year apart, so it
yeah,
always, and the end of that trilogy was Inferno. Um,
right.
but like I wouldn't, even then, I'd be hard pressed to to um to count them. I would, because like Power Pack, I don't think maybe Power Pack, but like Daredevil doesn't interact with
No, I think
the
he has to
X
deal with
character.
like the aftermath or something that's
Yeah,
going on in the streets
exactly.
or whatever, like
He's
the
dealing with
Marauder.
fallout.
Well, he's doesn't he fight some of the Marauders in that
He
issue?
yeah, he might have fought a couple of Marauders, but those are the ones that got away from the X-Men when they were going through the tunnels, the Morlock tunnels.
Right.
Um, Thor's only real connection was him just fucking shooting lightning through a tunnel.
Oh,
Uh,
that's where he fights Sabretooth.
yeah, he fights Sabretooth.
Daredevil fights Sabretooth.
Yeah. Um, so again, I'd be hard pressed to consider those events. Do I think that they are important and like crossovers? Yes. I'd say you need to get outside of your own little corner of the universe for it to be considered an event. Um, I'd say that it has to be referenced across. I would even say a plurality. I wouldn't even have to go as far as majority, but a plurality of the ongoing line. It has to occur at this. It has to be referenced at the same time that it's occurring in the you know in real time in the main titles.
Right.
So like Dazzler dealing with something with the hounds in the future 6 months after you know uh Days of Future Past comes out. I don't consider that part of Days of Future Past
Right.
any more that I would consider like Avengers Initiative as part of Civil War. No, it's just the fallout and somebody dealing with something afterwards.
Yeah, because I just looked at the synopsis for that Daredevil issue, and it's pretty much the tunnels are cleared out. Other parties have moved in, including Sabretooth, and
Yeah.
I guess some characters that were in the Daredevil book at the time, the Brat Pack,
Okay, so
made
that's
some comment about how Daredevil would protect him. So Sabretooth, being Sabretooth, goes and
yeah,
tracks down
Daredevil.
Daredevil to best him, and it's a little bit of a moment. It was more of a exploring Sabretooth kind of moment
Yeah.
from the synopsis. It was kind of where like the readers kind of realized like, oh, Sabretooth, it might be similar to Wolverine, but Sabretooth definitely goes more on instinct
Yes.
than Wolverine does, at least at that time.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd say that you might be able to make the argument that Mutant Massacre is an event. I would say that like Extinction Agenda, Executioner Song, not events. Clone Saga, not an event. Pivotal Moment, yes.
Yeah, for
All
all
of
of
these
those, yeah.
pivotal moments, yes, absolutely. I'd say that the next major event, I'd even be hard pressed to call Infinity Gauntlet an event. It's a mini series that is only tangentially referenced in anything outside of the main series. You don't see like an issue of Spider-Man or the X-Men or West Coast Avengers
Yeah,
or
nothing.
Darkhawk where hey half the cast is vanished because they all got blinked out of existence by uh by Thanos.
Right.
You don't see that referenced in any of those other books. They aren't on some side quest for to deal with that. They don't even reference that it's going on at the same time.
Uh,
If you ignore that Infinity Gauntlet's going on and you're reading the X books, you can continue ignoring it. You won't even know that it's happening.
right. I mean, it makes me wonder too, because I'm trying to remember with Secret Wars if they led into it at all, like the month that Secret Wars 1 came out, like the books that were going to be involved in it, even though everything that took place was in the Secret Wars book, but if they showed like those heroes getting teleported by the Beyonder.
Um, Honestly, yeah, It was like right near the end of a lot of the books,
Right, like
like
as the
the
story's
last
closing up, like
page.
the last page, last couple of panels, all of a sudden, bink, they're gone, and go
Yes,
read Secret Wars #1 to see where they went.
exactly. And actually, a lot of the time, it was like they were going. That happened around like the end of some of the books. It might have been when Secret Wars like #4 is out.
Right,
That character gets blinked in, and then the next issue of that book still came out the following month,
it was right back to normal.
and it was, well, they all get brought back. They reference things that happened, things that have changed for them, but then if you want to find out how that thing changed, they're right back on their new adventure, but with a slightly changed, like ASM 252 came out before I think it came out before Secret Wars 8.
Right, where Spidey gets the
So,
black and white suit.
so he's already in the black costume in ASM
Right,
252.
and there's no reference to.
Yeah, you don't find out until Secret Wars #8.
I mean, I think they could have gotten away with too at the time, like, oh, if you're wondering why Spidey's in this new costume, wait, just find out in an upcoming issue of Secret Wars.
Yes, that's exactly what they did.
Well,
And
it's reasonable.
that's what they did whenever, like, because I remember the first issue of X-Men after that, like Colossus comes back with a fucking wife,
Right.
and Lockheed comes back with a giant dragon that's his friend, except for in the Beyonder world, the dragon was about the same size as Lockheed. They get to our universe, and he blows up the size of like Fin Fang Foom.
Right, it turns into pretty much a kaiju, because wasn't like one of the X stories after that, or was that
It was
earlier?
that next issue where they're like fighting
The dragon over Tokyo or something like
it's
that.
like young dragons in love. Because that was, let's see here, that would have been X-Men 181, which came out in February of 84. And at the end of issue 180, the Beyonder shows up and just takes a bunch of them with them.
Right.
So, and that came out in January. So January there was an issue. February there was an issue too. But you have to go and read Fantastic or Secret Wars to know how this giant dragon gets there. How
Good marketing if you think about it.
Oh yeah, it was hella good marketing.
And it wasn't predatory either, that you had to go and read 30 other books in this from this other event just to figure out what's going on. It's like, no, it was what, a 12-issue miniseries?
It was 12 issues over 1 year. It had Jim Shooter and Mike Zack.
The art was good. The story was good.
You had the EIC of the company that was also a very well-known and well-respected comic writer, and one of their like yeoman, like journeyman, regular mainstay artists.
One of the stalwarts.
Yeah. On art. So you're like, okay, I'm going to get a decent story. Yeah, it's a toy.
I wonder how much of it that, I mean, I wonder if they marketed the idea to the toy company, like, hey, this is an event we're doing, might make for a good toy line.
No, actually,
or it was the other way around.
The toy line came to Marvel. At least my understanding. Now, again, this is from reading the Untold, Tales of Marvel, or Marvel the Untold Story, whatever the shit it was called. Now, according to Rob Liefeld, that is tabloid trash. So this may be completely wrong, but the way that they described it in that historical book was that the toy line wanted to do something with giving everybody shields.
Yeah.
And they're like, can you come up with a storyline for why we want half heroes, half villains? And Shooter was like, give me a couple of days, let me come up with some ideas here. And he pitched them a handful of ideas. They're like, well, we could do that one will make sense. He's like, all right.
And so yet the shields don't matter at all.
Yes, I know. Like he's like, okay, well, we'll drop this shit like 5 minutes in.
Well, the funny thing is, Crisis on Infinite Earths was the actual other way around, I think,
Yeah.
because they were doing that to fix their continuity.
Oh yeah.
And then I guess another toy company came along and saw the Secret Wars one. I don't
And
remember
they,
if that was sold well or not.
no, as far as I'm, because I
I'm
never
not.
see those.
Yeah,
So I'm guessing they did not sell well, or they got immediately absorbed into collections, never to be seen again.
because I
Um,
see more of those. What are they? Remco, something like that. The ones you'd see the ad for in the back of the comic book.
uh, oh, the Mego toys.
Mego, yeah,
Yeah,
I've
the
seen
cloth
those
ones.
more than any of the Secret Wars ones, or even the Crisis on Infinite Earth line.
Well, the Migos lasted forever, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah,
I think they're still being made, to be
it's entirely
honest.
possible.
Now I have a handful of the Secret Wars ones. I have Captain America, Magneto, and Doctor Octopus.
Right.
They're on my shelf right now. I mean, granted, they're beat to shit and probably not worth more than a dime, but
You found them.
I no, I had they were from me when I was a kid.
Oh, okay. That's even better.
Um, so and then I have some weird Punisher one from the early, like late 80s, early 90s that had that you could put like caps in his back,
Mm-hmm.
like the string of caps,
Yep, yep.
and like pull the trigger repeatedly and it made bang sounds.
Nice.
uh, but yeah, so you I think that the Marvel Secret Wars toys did sell fairly well. Um, but everybody just didn't understand what the point of the shields were.
Yeah, I agree on that. Even as a kid, I'm like, that's cool. They got a hologram shield. Why? Why does Captain America have his normal shield and then
A hologram shield.
the hologram shield?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if the DC line had anything stupid like that.
I don't know. I have some Hawkman that's up there. That's on my shelf too. That I don't know where in the hell
Because that's the thing.
what
It's a
line it
completely
came
different
from.
toy company too. Because they probably saw the Secret Wars toys, like, hey, we should get in on that.
Yeah, I think that they
What?
did try to. I just don't think it worked as well because DC already had the successful Mego, and most of their toy people were probably a little older and wanted the Migos because those are the ones that they grew up with. Um,
Oh
so
yeah, great. Trying to do a search for those old Crisis on Infinite Earth toys. I don't know if that's what they were called, but that's why they were made. It just brings up Todd McFarlane stuff. Fantastic. God damn it. Because I remember those big time. I never
yeah,
had any, but I remember them because they also had characters. I'm like, who's that?
yeah, because they had like the
And not in a
Robin
bad way.
one.
Like it made me curious as a kid.
Yeah,
Like I had never seen Firestorm before.
yeah. Um, I only have a very vague recollection of them. I remember the Robin one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, apparently the Hawkman one that I have is from that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and apparently it was their superpowers.
That's it. Okay. But
Um,
it came out around the same time
yeah, because
as Crisis did.
but you only had like two. You had Lex Luthor, Darkseid, and like one other villain, like Metallo or something.
Okay, so the series one, the first one that came out,
Yeah.
it was Aquaman, Batman, Brainiac, Barry Allen, Flash, Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, Hawkman, Joker, Luthor, Penguin, Robin, Superman, Wonder Woman.
Okay.
Then series two was Darkseid, Desaad, Doctor Fate, Firestorm, Green Arrow, Calabac, Mantis, Martian Manhunter, Parademon, Red Tornado, and Steppenwolf. Series three, they came out with Cyborg, Cyclotron, Golden Pharaoh. Him and Cyclotron both were made for the toy line.
Okay.
Mr. Freeze, Mr. Miracle, Orion, Plastic Man, Samurai, the one from Super Friends,
Okay.
Shazam and Tyr. Okay. And then a mail away exclusive of Clark Kent.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
we're into like what the hell. Yeah, it was so apparently it was just their superpowers line.
Yeah.
But I think it released around the time of Crisis. Um, but yeah, the like DC did their event. Now they had a good reason to do Crisis. Well,
Oh,
I
yeah.
guess. I guess. I mean, they wanted to reset Superman, really.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, though, too, it's like, I can't really say because I wasn't really reading DC when that had come out initially. But I wonder if, it's like, did they really need to, though? Was Superman really that out of whack?
I
That they couldn't
honestly
have
I
just
don't
done it
know.
narratively? I mean, was that at the point because of his power set just got to be too much? Like,
Was
Superman's like, hey, I can tow planets around.
was he just like old?
I mean,
Like
and was the Flash not selling well at the time for them to kill Barry Allen?
honestly, I think well, you remember 79 was the DC implosion.
Yeah.
Um they never quite entirely like got out of that. Um they had recovered somewhat, but I don't think they ever fully recovered. And I think because around this time, I think was when there was talk about Marvel actually licensing DC Comics.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, this would have been the early 80s.
Yeah, but
Uh,
still, just hearing that it was a potential talking
oh
point.
no, there's a letter that exists from like Warner Brothers to Jim Shooter.
Hmm.
I've seen it. It's scanned. It's on the internet somewhere. Like, hey, thank you for the nice talk. Um, we will be in touch regarding this proposal. Blah blah blah. And apparently, he had gotten basically on the phone with Byrne, like John Byrne, like basically as soon as the call was over, it was like, what would you think about? And there, somewhere out there is, this is an urban legend that somewhere out there is an original art piece that Byrne basically drew that day, like overnight, and like sent into the office of what would have been Marvel Comics Superman #1.
Yeah, I would have to say he's probably would sound like he was pretty excited about the potential of doing that.
Yes, and then that's the reason why he ended up being the guy on Man of Steel
Right.
when after Crisis, because he was like, I'm doing fucking Superman one way
Mm.
or the other. Um so there is the urban legend that that cover exists with the suit with the Marvel Comics Indicia
Mm-hmm.
on the cover and Superman #1. And now whether or not it actually exists, I have no idea. But
Yeah, I can imagine that's be something they'd want to get out right now in this day and age, like that it
no,
actually exists.
no. But there was apparently initial talks about Marvel licensing DC. And then Warner Brothers thought better of it. I guess the DC brass said, no, we can fix this. Give us like 2 years, and that's when they started putting all the things in order to start building to Crisis. Then they did Crisis, and then they did the whole kind of line wide relaunch post Crisis.
I don't know if I've actually ever heard you say this. Are you a fan of any of the Crises?
No.
Okay.
Now, granted, I have my absolute Crisis on Infinite Earths downstairs, signed by George Perez,
Nice.
with a little sketch inside, um, that I love, but still not a big fan of the Crises. I read that one. I read Zero Hour.
Yeah, that was considered a crisis, wasn't it?
It wasn't, but it was because that's before
Well,
they
wasn't
started
the
going
full
for
title
nostalgia
Zero
bait.
Hour Crisis in Time?
Maybe. Oh, that actually, I honestly don't remember.
I mean,
Uh,
but DC's also used the crisis thing, well, forever.
they had only, yeah, well, no, or yeah, because they had done the Crisis on Two Earths.
Right. And that
Um,
went way back. Zero Hour Crisis in Time.
okay, all right, so yeah, it was a crisis. Um,
They didn't really market it as such.
no, they didn't, because they weren't attempting to nostalgia bait you.
Right.
Um, and then I read Zero Hour, which I did not like. I read, oh, let's see, what was it? Infinite Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I read Identity Crisis, which was terribly disappointing because it had nothing to do with a crisis.
Yeah, well, I think they called it Identity Crisis, but they weren't trying. I think that was a stupid decision because people can, when they hear crisis when it comes to DC, they think it's going to be some big
Yes, exactly.
event, and I don't think they meant crisis in that sense when they did it. And it's like, oh, oops. You know, it's one of those
Yeah,
things like where someone's having an identity crisis.
yeah,
But
yeah. They did. Sorry,
could,
I broke something here.
no worries.
um,
Hopefully, accidentally.
yes. So no, that, but yeah, as Fee Machine points out here,
Yeah.
Infinite Crisis really did break. It broke the seal for DC.
Well, then he corrects himself and says identity crisis.
Honestly, I'd say Infinite Crisis did it.
Well,
Identity
Infinite
Crisis.
Crisis led to something else. Infinite Crisis then led to the first 52.
Yeah, it did. It did 52. What did was it 52 and then Countdown, or Countdown then 52?
I don't remember.
Um, I think it was Countdown.
Because they also did Countdown to Infinite Crisis, and they counted everything down like as a countdown. It started with issue 52, or was it
No,
countdown to
no, no.
whatever?
I think it was. I think it went Infinite Crisis, then Countdown, or no, then it went. Yeah, it was 52 first. No, it was Countdown. It started at 52 and it worked its way down to zero,
to zero, yeah.
and then it changed titles to 52, and it started with issue 1 the following week, and it was just the second year of the exact same. Oh, 52 did come first? Huh. Okay. Oh, and then yeah, it was Countdown
Okay,
the Final Crisis.
that's what it was.
Yeah, so they waited 2 years and did another crisis right after that. And then we've been getting crisis or the equivalent of a crisis like
Yeah,
every 2 years.
and like I was saying, not that little while ago, they've been doing that just within the JLA book.
Yeah.
They'll have almost like a crisis level event in that book, and it's like, oh god, and that's gotten really bit more so bad recently, like around the death metal era and the metal era. It's like, oh,
Yeah, because I mean,
this stuff is getting tedious.
metal was just a crisis.
It
Death
was.
metal was just a crisis.
I'd
But
say it
they
was just
were,
a continuation of the crisis from metal, but
yeah, it was,
still a crisis.
but it was a crisis. And all it was exploring the dark multiverse instead of the multiverse.
I mean, the concept is an okay concept, but it's like, wow, DC, you guys just took that concept and just beat it to
Well,
death within a couple of years. Nobody
it's
cares anymore.
exactly. They beat that horse until it was goddamn glue. and they're still beating it. It's already solidified and now just looks like a giant stain on the floor.
Now they're turning their attention to the joke, the Batman Who Laughs.
Yeah.
It's like,
And
okay, no one cares about that character anymore. You guys kind of beat him to death.
exactly. We don't care that much. All he is just dark Batman. Ooh. You can have Flashpoint, and honestly, like Flashpoint was just another crisis.
Yeah, with and because all the crises reset something to some degree.
Yeah.
Crisis on Infinite Earths reset the timeline and the multiverse, made crammed everything into one universe.
Yeah.
That they wanted to keep. Infinite Crisis comes along and brings back the multiverse.
Yeah.
I don't recall what Zero Hour did.
I think it brought everything into the same, all the teams into the same era.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't about multiverses, it was about time.
Right. I don't recall what Final Crisis reset. Because that kills Doom's Darkseid, and that's
yeah. Final Crisis, I think that was just closing out everything from Infinite Crisis with like Superboy Prime and Darkseid and shit like that.
Because after Final Crisis, we got Flashpoint.
Yep.
And then Flashpoint came New 52.
Yeah. And now,
again, there was also some more stupid marketing because I had at that point had read the first 52, and they're like, "Oh, New 52." I'm like, "Oh, okay, they're going to do something, another year-long story again." Oh,
but
this
no.
is the name of their reboot.
Yeah.
The fuck.
Yeah. And so, like, DC still was moderating itself until, you know what? Even after Zero Hour, which was a sequel, like a second Crisis,
Yeah.
they did not just like break it. And they kept, so as the 90s, DC was more moderate, which is kind of funny.
It kind of is. But we had some good runs then, like, Jeff Johns' JSA from the 90s. Good stuff.
Was that
I think
90s?
that was the 90s.
I thought that was the early 2000s because I thought that was after he left Marvel again. Because he came over to Marvel in about 2001 and he spent about a year or two there. And then that's when he went to DC and kind of became the DC guy.
99 it was.
Okay, 99.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's when he started JSA.
Yeah, it was the JSA stuff.
Okay.
When he did his first JSA run.
Okay. And then he went to Marvel for a couple, like 2 years. And
this
then
is the one that had both Stargirl
and Starman.
And Starman. Yeah, and Starman wore a leather coat and goggles.
Yeah.
That was essentially
the James Robinson Starman.
Mm-hmm. Because it looks like the lineup for that, from just looking at it on Amazon, was Wildcat, Hourman, Atom Smasher, Star Spangled Kid, Hawk Girl, Flash, Green Lantern, Black Canary, Stargirl, or what they call, or she considered Star Spangled Kid before. Yeah, I think that's what that was going on there before they gave her the stick and made her a Stargirl.
Yeah.
Sentinel, Wildcat, the Flash, Black Canary, Starman, Sand, Hourman, Atom Smasher, the Star Spangled Kid, and Hawkgirl.
Okay.
Odd lineup, but I've read some of it and it was pretty good.
All right. I mean, I'll take your word for it. I've never thought Jeff Johns was. I may call me a heretic. I don't think he's all that much. He's nothing special in my book.
In my opinion, he's good. I wouldn't say he's amazing or he's all that special as you put it, but he's good at what he does.
I mean, he reminds me of just kind of marginally above, average comic book writer that really likes the lore, and you can tell that he loves what he's doing.
Right.
It's not just a gig for him,
I mean, 'cause I enjoyed his Green Lantern run too.
but he's J.M. DeMatteis or Howard Mackey that obviously really loves what he's doing.
There's nothing
That's
wrong
it.
with that.
No, but I also, you will almost never find anyone that has ever bought a comic because J.M. DeMatteis or Howard Mackey was the writer. They will not drop a book because they are,
Right.
but they won't go out of their way to read something that they're not already reading just because that guy's writing. And that's the way I am with Jeff Johns. In fact, the only thing I think I've ever liked that he's done was Geiger, and even that I didn't think was groundbreaking in any way. It was just generic uh post-apocalyptic, sort of superhero book that nothing really happened.
Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to that with him, I think he's better at playing with other people's lore.
Maybe.
And then coming up with his own stuff. He can come up with great stuff when he's got a framework within which to come up with his own stuff.
Okay. I mean, I can.
Because he took some of the things, for example, in Green Lantern, he took some of the stuff that was already established that's been kind of put on the back burner or was still kind of talked about in the lore, but not in the forefront of it. Like the whole what he did with the color yellow. He actually finally explained that to a degree where it's like, oh hey, cool. At least it's not just some goofy shit that they came up with in the 50s anymore.
Honestly, I preferred the goofy shit that they came up in the 50s.
Oh really?
Because I hate the rainbow lanterns.
Okay.
I legitimately do. I think that having a spectrum of lanterns is fucking retarded.
Having a spectrum of lanterns is being on the spectrum, shall we say?
Yes. Yeah, I think that it's stupid and it was a terrible idea, and it removes anything that was unique about having a Green Lantern Corps. If you had, here's what you can do. You can have a Green Lantern Corps, or you can have 15 lanterns of different color. There's your choices. Do not try to mix those two together.
And they did.
And they did. And it's stupid. And now you have, honestly, you just have Dragon Ball with different rings.
Yeah. And what's funny too was, oh, fuck, was that Lantern event that everybody, Blackest Night.
Yeah.
That was sorry, our bad guys from DC to the fans in some ways, because a lot of characters that people were pissed off that they had killed all came back. Yeah, yep. John Jones was dead since Final Crisis.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, he came back. It's like a lot of people that I think that's when they brought Ice back.
I'll take your word for it. I had already completely dipped out of DC by that point.
They also brought some other shitheels back, like Maxwell Lord gets brought back.
Oh yeah, well, Wonder Woman needs to break his neck again. Was that, what was that in? That was in I
think that was in Infinite Crisis.
That was in Infinite? Oh no, it was in, I think it was in the lead up to Infinite Crisis. I think it actually happened in Infinite Crisis. But regardless, it's still terrible. Look, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not a big DC fan.
I know that. I've heard you say that as much before.
Their characters, honestly, it'd be like, I can imagine most of the DC characters being in, if Dollar Tree had their own line of,
the funny thing is where Marvel has the issue of doing a lot of alliteration.
Yes.
With the real identity of their heroes. Scott Summers, Peter Parker, Reed Richards. DC, they never got out of the 30s, 40s, and 50s mentality of Superman, Lightning Lad, Cosmic Boy.
Exactly.
Like, okay.
Exactly. And even their modern characters, they tried to go too modern
Right.
because Marvel had already taken all of the like general language, like shit that you'd actually call something. They had already taken all of those names
Yeah.
while DC was still fucking about with their lightning lads and you know 40-second different Robin.
Yeah.
Um, and even then, like the coolest, like honestly, Red Robin was fine. Arsenal, great name, great design. They keep wanting to make him fucking Speedy again.
Hmm.
Speedy is the shittiest name for somebody that shoots arrows I have ever heard. I'd be happier with Red Lantern or Red Arrow.
I mean, one of the things is like you're gonna call somebody Speedy. Why isn't that the Flash's sidekick?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, even in the '60s, you'd think that kind of logic would have.
And you know what? And DC did the same thing. They had a great name for a character in Impulse.
Yeah. Now what is he, Kid Flash?
Yeah, and then they changed him to Kid Flash. Yeah, way to date your character and make him less appealing.
I mean, I could
You,
see villains calling him that, just trying to get under his skin.
yeah,
But
but no, he shouldn't. He shouldn't have been. He should have stuck with Impulse. Um, you know, any
I
they've
agree with the
never.
legacy characters not having a mantle per se, and I understand how like the quote unquote families work. You know, the Bat family, the Superman family, the Flash family, so on and so forth.
Yeah,
But sometimes it's like anytime they do something like that, it's like, oh, to honor the family, like. And is every Flash going to go through this?
I will never give up my belief that anyone that is drawn to becoming a superhero, the last thing in the world they would ever want to do, with very rare exception of complete fanboys and fangirls, would be to live in the shadow by taking the name of someone else. It
Right.
is an inherently egotistical activity to believe that you can dish out and meet justice across the criminal world better than the existing systems. That is an inherently egotistical endeavor. The last thing you're going to do is subjugate that ego by calling yourself, being the other Batman or the seventh Flash or Superboy instead of Superman. No, you'll never do it.
I mean, the one thing too that I will say in DC's defense is, or in anybody's defense, really, the only time that, in my opinion, is acceptable is like someone replacing a character. If the first character died, and they're doing it to honor the memory of
But
that person.
even then, most of them, the even as much as you'd love, say that they are your best friend. Do you know what you don't do? Your best friend dies, you're not there trying to fuck his wife and take his
True.
life.
No,
You
true. I agree. At the same time, though, it also depends on how it's done. I think sometimes it can be done in some form of taste, but this is comic books we're talking about. Taste is
Oh, I know.
discretionary at best.
I get, but my point is, like, your ego, if you're choosing to go out there, your ego is not going to let you
Yeah.
be perpetually in the shadow of someone else.
I mean, sure, that's a fair point considering that was the whole reason for Nightwing becoming a thing.
Yes, because he didn't want to live in Batman's shadow.
And I think as he got older, I'm sure he got kind of tired of that fucking outfit too.
Oh yeah, of course, especially with before it had pants. Um,
Short pants and booties, buddy. That's what you get.
yeah, but like, in general though, you're displaying a level of ego beyond
Yeah.
what most people do. I
And the
mean,
fun, you can say that even like the more humble heroes that are out there, like for Peter Parker, for example,
yeah, even
he still
him,
got a bigger ego than the average egotist would
exactly.
have.
Exactly. And there is no way that he'd be like, I'm gonna be Captain America Jr.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, too, there has been times too in various eras of Spider-Man. Someone says something to him. He's like, "I just beat up Doctor Doom last night. I can't believe I have to take this from someone like you."
Yes, exactly. And he's, he has an ego too. That's it's why legacies in Marvel make zero sense.
Yeah.
It's the reason why I've never liked DC, because they are chock full of legacies.
Well, the thing with at first, some of their legacies was stuff that they brought back that hadn't been around in like decades upon decades.
Oh, I know.
And that kind of stuff, it's like, okay, unless you really kept up with shit, who the fuck knew who Alan Scott was?
Yeah, exactly.
And so they bring back Alan Scott, or they bring back someone like Alan Scott. Same thing with any of like those characters, like the
When they brought
JSA
back the
characters.
Golden Age heroes.
Yeah, they brought them back, and in some cases changed them up. You had Star Spangled Kid initially came back as a girl and then turned to Stargirl.
Yeah, but
No,
like
no one complained.
Jay Garrick,
Yeah, he's
coming
still
back
there
as the Flash. I mean, the whole point, and here's, I mean, I hate to say it because it is their history.
Yeah,
but DC tried to reinvent itself with Showcase 4, which was a whole new Flash with a whole different style. And then they, a couple of years later, they feel compelled to, bring back their history.
right.
Your history failed you guys. It's the reason why you had to start the Silver Age with Showcase 4 and put guys into spandex bodysuits, because your shit that you were doing before outside of Superman and Batman didn't work.
Yeah. I mean, I know the JSA was popular in its initial run back in the 40s, but they were the equivalent of the Invaders from Marvel for DC.
Yes, exactly.
And so that makes, perfect sense, but it's not like you're seeing, Marvel
But
trying to bring back Union Jack.
I mean, they do periodically, and it fails every time.
Yeah,
They've
now he's just
tried bringing
referenced
back,
once in a while.
yeah, and they've tried bringing back the the Invaders series,
Mm-hmm.
like probably a half dozen times over the last 20 years.
And no one's really going to care about it.
Nobody ever does care. Right before they did, House of M, or not House of M, Disassembled,
Mm-hmm.
one of the last arcs of um Avengers before that was about bringing the invaders to the present day,
Right.
so that they could all be running around. So you'd have, because I guess Namor might have been dead around that time. So they brought like the past
Namor back, and yeah.
and Toro and the original Human Torch.
Right.
And, Union Jack and
Bucky and
no, Bucky.
Or did they not touch Bucky?
They didn't touch Bucky because they knew that Brubaker already sort of had a plan, because they knew that they were going to be doing Disassembled.
Right. And they didn't bring back Cap either, I assume.
Yeah, because actually I think they did bring back that Cap. And he was running around for a short period of time.
It wouldn't surprise me if they did, so that way they can turn around and kill him off.
Well, because
and then say like, "Oh, we killed Captain America." Yeah, not the one that's still gonna remain alive, that everybody knows.
The I can't remember how that Invaders series went, but regardless, they didn't bring Bucky because they knew since they were about to start Disassembled.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, the Iron Man relaunch, the Captain America relaunch. Thor was, they didn't bring Thor back because it was was that around the time that Michael Oeming went on to Thor? Well, it was around the time that the Warren Ellis Iron Man and the Brubaker Cap were starting up. Oh yeah, it had US Agent replace Cap in that series. That was right. Um, but yeah, it was. But they knew what they were going to be doing. What Brubaker was going to be doing with Cap on the solo book and the whole Winter Soldier thing, and then it was going to end up being Bucky. So they didn't want to bring Bucky to the present.
Right. Which makes sense.
Yeah. So we got so far off the topic of 90s excess, man.
Yeah, well, we tend to do that no matter what we're talking about.
That is a good point. That is a good point.
But it is about that time. I know you said you wanted to keep it nice and tight tonight.
Yeah, I got the girlfriend's upstairs, and I know if it's more than about 2 hours, she's gonna be like, "What are you doing?
Stop talking your nerd shit."
Yeah, stop talking your nerd shit. You were doing that Saturday morning. Yes, I was still asleep, but you were doing that Saturday morning. That's
Right.
your day to do that.
Well, I appreciate you joining me again tonight. We'll definitely have to keep this up somewhat regularly, and
Oh, absolutely. I am
and
glad
start
to do it.
yep, and plan a little bit more in advance and get some more people get on with us next time, and really, hopefully,
Yes.
a couple extra people will help keep us on topic.
Yes, hopefully. Or maybe I just have to actually try to help you.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, because I have a tendency to do that sometimes.
yeah, we need somebody. Where's Wes? He needs to come and keep us in line and yell at us. I know it's not his show or his channel, but he can come and yell at us.
I can see him doing like the disapproving look with the foot tap, like, "Come on, guys."
Yeah, or we can get Perch to come on and yell at us.
I think Perch might actually end up joining in on the shenanigans more than keeping us in line.
Yeah, that's a good point. Him, maybe Joe Corallo will help.
Yeah, that's entirely possible.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Oh yeah.
Sir.
Anything you want to plug?
No, I don't do anything. I don't have my own. I technically, I guess I have a YouTube channel. I think I have like 6 videos on it,
Right.
including one of me freezing a block of a Scene of Grace Iceman comic into a block of ice and then cutting it in half with a sawzall.
That's and impressive.
It seemed excessive in hindsight.
But
I think I have
a chuckle.
I think I have a tour of my nerd room on there. So,
I believe that. Yeah.
But other than that, I don't make anything. I don't sell anything. I am not here to shill for anyone. So if I recommend something, I have absolutely zero financial stake in it.
That's one of the things I respect about you. And as far as I go, I did a stream last night with Mark the Cyborg playing some Elden Ring on both of our channels. So go check it out. You see both perspectives of us dying a little more than we both anticipated. And then other than that, coming up this week, Thursday night, me and Matt from Foulball Productions should be doing some gaming. Not sure entirely what as of yet, but that's our gaming night. And then Friday, I'll be on his channel for the MF or Cocktail Lounge. And after last week's, how do I say this? Well, yeah, we turned around and lately on his channel, we've been just doing some like top 50 of a movie genre of all time. Ooh. And normally by the end of the list, we're like, these people are fucking stupid. Well, we did the top 100 games of all time. And by the time we were done, not only were we mad, we were offended.
That there were so few games that actually deserved to be in a top 100 that ended up in the wrong
spots or whatever. To the point where one of the guys is like, whoever's in the chat clipped this, and he called out the name of the company that put it out, put out the list, that website. He's like, yeah, make sure you clip that and link it to him.
Yeah. Oh, so you're going through somebody else's list.
Right. And so we were so offended and pissed off this week, we're going to start doing our own.
Oh God, yeah.
And that's just
the problem is when you start doing stuff like that and you're like, I'm going to put my own list together. That like the top 10, that's easy. Top 25, also pretty easy. Now, the top 10, top 5, you're going to have trouble figuring out which ones actually go in 5. You end up with like 9 things for a top 5, but it makes the top 10 really easy. Top 25, also pretty easy. Once you get into top 50s, then you're like, wow, this shit's, I'm really stretching it. And when you get to a top 100, you're like, I really like this medium of entertainment, whatever it may be, books, movies, TV shows, comics, video games. But this this thing that I have to put at number 84, in no sane world should that be in the top 84 of anything.
Right. Well, the other problem too is once you start getting into of all games of all time, the fact that you
Oh,
have so many to choose from, and it's like there are some glaring omissions who are like, are you fucking kidding me? Not a single Tomb Raider game, not one in the top 100 games.
Doom better be on there.
Doom was on there, but that was the only class. I think Wolfenstein may have been too,
The
but
original.
yeah, no, the Wolfenstein 3D.
Oh, I like the Castle Wolfenstein.
Yeah, I remember those as well. But no Quake, no Unreal,
Hey,
Half-Life 2, but not the first Half-Life.
any video game where you finish up by killing Mecha Hitler
How can you go wrong?
is good. I
And
mean,
then like the top game in their mind was Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Number one game of all time.
if anything, it should be if it's any Zelda game,
The original.
it's either the original or
The Super NES one.
Ocarina of Time.
Ocarina, yeah.
Ocarina of Time, yeah. That was
But
a
some
64 game.
right, and Majora's Mask was also on the 64.
Yeah, and Ocarina of Time was so
Better.
much better.
It was one of those things where we're just sitting there like, yep, we're doing our own next week. Holy Christ, these people are fucking imbeciles.
Yeah.
Gibbering idiots.
Somehow coming out of the entertainment media, it does not surprise me.
No, me either. But on that note, thank you guys in chat for coming and hanging out. Thank you again, Doc. And we will be seeing you again soon. Have a great night, everyone.
Later, y'all.